I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to the second episode of Forgotten Oscar Films. And this week, we're going to be looking at the 1987 class of movies with the Best Picture nominee, Hope and Glory. Now, if you're new to the series, which of course you are because it's only the second episode, let me give a brief introduction as to what the series is and what we'll be doing for the next 7 months. So essentially, what I'm going to be doing is looking at the Best Picture nominees starting from the year 1988 and working backwards. I'm going to look at a movie and pick one of the Best Picture nominees that I personally never heard of or hasn't been sort of stood the test of time and hasn't been really talked about in the cultural conversation at large. Every year there's these so many movies that don't get nominated for Best Picture, but then we still remember years later as these acclaimed movies, whether they be blockbusters or just sort of cult films. So I wanted to go back, and I know those films, but I wanted to go back and see, at the time, what did the Academy think was one of the year's 5 best films, and then talk about maybe does it hold up today? Is that why the reason it hasn't been talked about, or certain reasons? I'm trying to figure out why, but also giving some of my thoughts on the film as well. Similar to sort of Old on Old, though, it also gives a sort of unique history perspective, which I'll go in right now, just to get the landscape. So if you're a fan of the Oscars, you can get some Oscar history, as well as some analytical sort of thoughts on the movie. So jumping into it, let's start with just the 4 other Best Picture nominees. One of them was Broadcast News. This is a film by James L. Brooks, a film I'd seen before, a film that I think has stayed in the conversation because of James L. Brooks. He had an amazing run in the 80s and 90s specifically, winning a bunch of Oscars, and he produced The Simpsons and produced so many of these great 80s classic movies. He was just sort of everything he had was great. Then even in the 60s and 70s of the TV shows he did, he had a really long, really great creative streak on him, and I think a lot of people consider Broadcast News a great performance by him. And you have some great actors. People, when they say what's the best Holly Hunter performance, a lot of times they go to Broadcast News. So that's one that stays the test of time. The Last Emperor, which won Best Picture, I almost went with that one because it won Best Picture, and it really hasn't stood the test of time in terms of it winning all these awards. 1987 was a really great year for movies too. And a lot of them actually didn't get nominated. That being said, Wall Street and Full Metal Jacket, things that did hold up, but just ended up not getting nominated for Best Picture. But The Last Emperor swept the Oscars, won almost every award it was nominated for. I think it won 8 or 9. It was a huge sort of success, and it seemed sort of like doing my research was that it was done by Bernardo Bertolucci, who did Last Tango in Paris and a couple of other great films, and this was sort of his one that they were sort of rewarding for him for those movies, essentially. Like, okay, this is a good movie, your other movies are better, but we want to give you so much because we like you so much. So I still think that it's because it's a significant part of an acclaimed director like Bertolucci's sort of filmography that it should be sort of respected, and I'd at least give enough credit to not sort of put it in the series. Now we have Moonstruck, which has sort of the central topic of Cher, who was a huge cultural icon at the time and still sort of is, winning her Oscar. And also stars Nicolas Cage, who had a great breakthrough performance there with Moonstruck. So with that Nicolas Cage, if you're thinking about Nicolas Cage things, if you want to know where he started, you go from there. And then the other one was Fatal Attraction, which, believe it or not, was the second highest grossing movie of 1987, behind the number one, which is Three Men and a Baby, which to me is absolutely insane to think, oh wait, there's no sequels and there's no sort of, sort of these studio comedies or studio product thrillers being some of the highest grossing movies of all time, not superhero movies. Yes, I know, it's sort of a strange sight to say. It would be very, very strange if we saw that today in 2019, but that's why I love doing these series of going back and seeing something like that. And Fatal Attraction really spawned a bunch of the 90s and even up to 50 Shades of Grey today. The erotic thriller, that sort of format, the same way sort of When Harry Met Sally did that for the modern day romantic comedy. I think Fatal Attraction did that for the sort of erotic thriller that was very popular in the 90s especially, because of the success of that film, and launched the career as well of helped the career of Glenn Close. I think really launched it for Michael Douglas as well. So, when I was looking at Hope and Glory, I'm like, yes, it's done by John Boorman, who did Deliverance and The Little Buddha, but The Little Buddha hasn't really held up as a great film, kind of a funny Keanu Reeves film, if anything. And then Deliverance is sort of a great classic Burt Reynolds kind of a role, a movie I haven't seen. I think in terms of weighing all the options, I chose Hope and Glory. And I'm trying to figure out why it didn't get remembered, but I'll leave that to the end of the show. But so it's just transitioning over into my thoughts. Oh, actually, before that, in terms of where this was positioned in the Oscar landscape, so much of it has to do with Oscar campaigns, as we talked about. We can talk about for 5-6 months of the year. Talked about the Oscars in my old Oscar countdown series. It has to do with money, it has to do with campaigns. It's been very rampant, in the modern 21st century, but even in the 80s, this was a prevalent thing, and people, for your consideration ads and all that kind of stuff. In Hope and Glory, I think every year there's certain boxes that movies fill. This was the periodic film. It was also sort of the personal film. Last year we had Roma being the sort of personal film of Alfonso Cuarón, and The Favorite being sort of the period film. Roma also kind of being a period film in that way. And then for John Boorman, who was an established director at the time, he'd done Deliverance, and this was a personal film for him. This is very autobiographical in a lot of ways, and it's this period piece, which Fatal Attraction, Podcast News were not. Moonstruck was not, I don't think so. And then Last Emperor was sort of the big historical one, whereas this one more sort of the classic British period piece that we see sort of popping in and out. Now let's transition over to my thoughts of the film. Overall, I was maybe a little bit more mixed on it, because I enjoyed certain aspects a lot, and certain things I was really impressed by, but then other things maybe didn't hold up as well, and didn't sort of and hurt the movies maybe in a modern day lens. That being just that, I love the kids stuff, particularly this young boy here. I'm forgetting his name, unfortunately, but I think all the stuff he does and all the stuff he does with his little kids are really great. I didn't know really anything about this movie going into it, and seeing it, essentially it's the World War II story perspective told from a civilian perspective, the people on the ground not really knowing the actual consequences of the film. So especially this works well for kids' eyes, because they don't really understand, the Holocaust or what Hitler's doing, or sort of the deaths that are going on. They just see, their dad's going away, and they have to watch movies in the theaters, and we really get that right away when the kids are sort of messing around in the theaters and when the historical stuff is going on. But when they sit down, when the Western comes on, and they're all focused for that. So that was really fun. Them just sort of trying to act like adults in this sort of wartime scenario, sort of in these empty, abandoned houses. Gives it sort of an eerie vibe, but also a really playful vibe. It's very childlike. I'm seeing it from this child's perspective. What was really sort of interesting points in him interacting with the local gang, which in its own way is, kids just trying to act like adults, which is so much fun, and just seeing sort of the imagination they have and their limited perspective in a lot of ways gives us sort of a broader perspective on the war, and a different perspective on the war that we haven't seen. There's this great scene, when they go outside and, there's fireworks when the first bombing was. Instead of the bombings, they think of it as fireworks. They're not little kids, it's a teenager, and this little boy here. So they understand what's going on, they understand it's a war, but to them, they don't fully comprehend it, so they sort of treat it as, this fun playground, because tanks and armies, it's so much fun, especially being a little boy. However, I do think that the film isn't totally from this boy's perspective. I think in a lot of ways it veers off and goes into the mother, and focuses a lot about her and her past, and then the sister and the sexual awakening, and then it sort of becomes sort of a traditional World War II movie, but then they try to enter in the aspect that the mom doesn't really know what's going on, and that she's almost just as clueless as the son in a lot of ways, that she's like, there's a war, but we can still laugh, and we can go outside and, look at the planes, and oh my god. So I can't almost relate to that in a lot of ways, just because maybe I understand that, planes weren't as common, so that was a unique experience, but after a while you would think, okay, this is annoyance, but they kept on seeing almost amazed by it every single time. There's kind of melodramatic in certain scenarios, and not sort of as a genre in terms of overacting, I felt, but also because I can't really give that character a break of the mom. She's clueless as to what's going on in the war, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because she was alive during World War I. She's probably heard some of the stories. She has to know at some part that this is bad, and she's supposed to be the one that's supposed to say, hey kids, this is a serious threat, you're not supposed to be playing around, and she also seems to be playing around, and then gives the film sort of an irresponsible film vibe. But then, say we're stripping away sort of the World War II aspect, and it's just a story about a coming of age, but then it doesn't really work as well aside from the young boy's perspective, because then I feel very traditional, and things feel staged in certain elements. I just felt sort of the wandering aspect of the kid and his little adventures and episodic things that he does, and then you go back to this other kind of film which is stilted and staged and felt out of place in a lot of ways. So I really enjoyed the kid stuff, but the other stuff with the family I felt to be largely strange and dated, and I couldn't relate to those characters very well, which is maybe unfortunate for the film. But let's answer the essential question as to why this hasn't held up. Why are we talking about this? Why did I choose this one for the 1987 Best Picture nominees? It was nominated for Best Picture. Why don't people talk about this film as one of their favorite films of all time? Well, this is really a significant year that we can look back on and take different things from each year. Every year we take different things. This year, I think it was the year of the breakout star. Holly Hunter had Broadcast News and Raising Arizona, which made her an amazing leading actress until she won her Oscar for The Piano. William Hurt was on a roll. He was in, I think, 5 Best Picture nominees in the 80s. 3's been nominated. This is his 3rd time for Broadcast News, getting nominated for Best Actor. So William Hurt's been so instrumental right now. Michael Douglas had Wall Street and Fatal Attraction, and yes, he'd been a producer before, but now this is really him as a main lead actor. Nicolas Cage had Moonstruck and Raising Arizona, and really sort of launched his career. So I think there's all these different great actors who are really launching the career. So when we go back, it's like, oh, this is one of Nicolas Cage's early great performances. Same with Michael Douglas. Same with Holly Hunter. All these little great pieces were. Yes, that's the things we take away. And then there was other films that were not nominated that year. Like I said before, Full Metal Jacket, Predator, I believe both came out in 1987. Those are films that people really enjoy. And I think there's actually a bit of an issue thing with film criticism, especially the people who are at their age right now, and in relationship to the 80s. And I think even just a pop culture sort of generalization of their relationship to the 80s. A lot of the 80s was sort of very mainstream, blockbusters that were 4-quadrant hits for the family, everyone can enjoy them, and they also made a lot of money. And we see that sort of similarly right now, but at least right now we have the indie sort of aspects to it that are getting nominated for Oscars and whatnot. But at that in the 80s, especially people, the film critics now, for example, who were kids at the time, what are they recommending to a generation like myself? They're recommending Star Wars and Ghostbusters and Back to the Future. These really great, I think those are great movies, but they're blockbusters, and they're maybe not going to recommend this period drama from the 80s that did pretty well, sort of a British success, but maybe less so in North America. That has a somewhat prominent director, but not as prominent as, say, someone like Robert Zemeckis. It doesn't have any sort of recognizable stars. So at least, you're seeing Nicolas Cage today, and you go, hey, I love National Treasure, and they spark a conversation about Nicolas Cage, best Nicolas Cage movies, right? I don't know if they're going to say the best Sarah Miles movies, or even John Boorman. I'm not sure if he has an extensive enough filmography. I just think that, when you're looking from a film criticism aspect, which is a lot of ways how I get recommendations and whatnot, why it hasn't sort of stuck in my mind is because certain reasons, because it doesn't have sort of recognizable actors, because it wasn't a huge success. But even in a lot of ways, sometimes it's about the cult hits. The Big Lebowski is a huge success today. Everyone loves it, everyone recommends that because no one saw it, and then everyone saw it, and then, no one saw it at the time, but then when people saw it on DVDs, they're like, this is a great movie. Similarly with Fight Club, and it becomes a cult status, and people really love the movie, and they want to spread that, sort of evangelize the word of these great movies. But when a movie comes out, it's nominated for the right amount of Oscars, period drama, well done. It's not. So remember, we get these great sort of prestige Oscar dramas each and every year. It really has to be a special one to stand out and for people to recommend it year after year. And unfortunately, I don't think Hope and Glory did. I don't think this is something that people go back to and really recommend in a lot of ways. And maybe, of course, this is sort of stilted to a point of view. This is my point of view. Maybe you've seen it on TV. Maybe you're British and it's a huge thing and you watch it in school every single year. I don't know. But for me, Hope and Glory was sort of a bit of a mixed bag from a movie I've never really heard of from 1987. That's about it, guys. Next week, stay tuned for 1986, which will be The Mission, with Robert De Niro and Jeremy Irons, which would be a great one. I haven't seen that one yet, but that one's almost trying to build a bit of a cult status, so I'm trying to catch it before it sort of breaks into mainstream just yet, and I haven't seen it yet, and it's certainly maybe a forgotten De Niro film of the 80s when he's sort of arguably at his height. That's about it, guys. I hope you guys enjoy the episode. This is still the beginning of the series, so comment below, let me know if there's any criticisms or thoughts you want how to change the series, or what you want to see, maybe potential Oscar films. That always helps. That's about it, guys, though. I hope you guys enjoy the episode, and until next time, stay tuned.